Hey everybody, welcome back to Moscow, to your Moscow update. I'm going to be doing more and more of these, and it's important that we do them from here, from Russia. So the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is this quite unbalanced tweet or message on Truth Social from Donald Trump suggesting that the Russian casualty rate in Ukraine is 14 times greater than Ukraine. Now, let's get some things straight here. Of course, Russia is losing men. I live here in this country. I know people who've been killed in the war. And of course, Russia is losing people. But the idea that it's 14-1 in Ukraine's favor is so ridiculously unfounded and fantastical that it really needs to be called out. I mean, even the most anti-Russian MI6 funded outlet called Media Zona, and you can check this out, I'll post the links in the comments, suggests that around 100,000 to 160,000 Russians have died since the start of the conflict. I think that includes the militias fighting in Donbass as well. Now, I actually think they're overstated. I think it's less than that. But in Ukraine, we know that at least 1 million people have died. They're running out of graveyards. The groundwater is polluted. It's absolutely destroyed. The environment is destroyed. There's no room in the municipalities to bury the men. That's without looking at the hundreds of thousands, 400,000 people who are missing. And that's according to the Red Cross reports. Now, these people are, saying, oh, that's various different reports. Hundreds of thousands of people are missing. Every day, Russian troops recover hundreds of Ukrainian dead. They discover a horrendous landscape of decaying corpses. The Ukrainian military is so corrupt, it leaves its dead on the field. Its commanders still collect the payments for these people. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And at the nub of this insane statement from Donald Trump is what intelligence? Intelligence from Ukraine, from the Ukrainians. We know Ukraine is grossly corrupt. We know that Volodymyr Zelensky is a dictator. We know that his client parliament will do whatever he says. First he says we're going to rescind the powers of the anti-corruption group. The parliament votes absolutely in favour, massive majority for him. Then he suddenly says, oh, that's a bad idea because of the protests and the massive outpouring of anger, even in Europe and the United States, at his attempt to crush the anti-corruption bodies, NABU in particular, which is run by the Americans. So you can't trust the weather forecast that comes out of Kiev. Russia doesn't publish its casualty figures publicly either. But again, that is monitored. There are thousands of Telegram channels here. Russia is a living, breathing society where people talk all the time. If there was any remote sense that the losses were that great, or in a month 20,000 men had been killed, we would know all about that. We can see the graveyards, we can see this stuff. It just doesn't exist. It's an absolute fantasy. It's an absolute fantasy. I would suggest that it's even misinformation, it's disinformation. And why is it being peddled right now from the White House? Who is advising President Donald Trump, a man who many of us had such hope would bring some objectivity to the war in Ukraine? Before he became president, people in his cabinet, people he was mooting that he would be involved with, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, J.D. Vance, spoke a lot of sense on Ukraine, on this Ukro scam, this vast corruption operation on the fringes of Europe. Now, nothing of the machine fights against the machine. They're all towing the line behind Donald Trump. And of course, as soon as Zelensky is begging for weapons and the Americans saying, well, look, we're kind of pulling out of this thing. We know this was Biden's war. But as soon as the Epstein affair rears its ugly head, what happens? America is sending nuclear submarines to Russia because of a tweet. Think about that. The American president has dispatched nuclear-capable strike submarines towards Russia because of a tweet. That's who's in charge in the West. Think about that. Think about it very carefully. Think about Vladimir Putin's response in response to it. So, this is all theatre, in my view. there's anything will be done now to distract from America and America's political and Trump's political domestic problems. Anything will be done. Mark my words. This is only the beginning of it, probably. The shutting down of the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. Yeah. How's that going? 24 hours? 50 days? 10 days? 6 days? How many days? The Russians are not going to do the bidding of an American president whose country and the mechanisms by which they interfered in Ukraine and tried to drag us towards this Third World War is all American. Victoria Nuland, Jeffrey Pyatt, educate yourselves about the reality of this civil conflict that was fomented, created in Ukraine, and this idea that Mr. Trump was going to end the war in Ukraine, much like Mr. Zelensky was going to end the war in Ukraine in 2019 when he was elected by a landslide. He was going to also tackle corruption. Mr. Trump was going to end the war in Ukraine, and he was going to tackle corruption. He was going to expose Mr. Epstein's connections. He was going to do a lot of things. I'm asking you guys now to look at this objectively and see what's actually happening. Wars of distraction aren't such an uncommon thing, particularly in America, in the West, where domestic crises engender this allergic response. It's got to be someone else's fault. Starmer does it in the UK. People starving, food banks, knife crime. It's all Vladimir Putin's fault. Even in Ireland, where I'm from, the idiotic cabal elite of the EU are also doing it. I'm supposedly not independent. I'm supposedly a mouthpiece for Vladimir Putin. He's over here right beside me, handing me notes on what to say to you. This is the insane rhetoric of this Western war machine, which will sacrifice anything they need to do to deflect from their own catastrophic political reality. One other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is what's happening in Europe, particularly in a place called Republika Srpska, which is a Serb enclave, if you like, created inside Bosnia-Herzegovina in the aftermath of the Yugoslav wars to protect Serbs. Now, remember, everything you've heard about Serbia has been told to you by people who despise the Serbs. And it's not new that they despise the Serbs. They've hated the Serbs for centuries. Remember that. Everything you know, if you're in the West and you're subjected to this Western propaganda by osmosis constantly, everything you know about Serbia has been told you by people who hate them, much like Russia. Everything you know about Russia, if you were to read the Western media, is written by people who are deployed, paid and funded. As we know, 90% of the media in Ukraine itself was funded by US aid, which is, of course, the CIA cutout, or was. In Republika Srpska at the moment, the president, elected by the 1.2 million people who live there, is now facing arrest warrants issued by the Bosnian government. Arrest warrants for trying to protect the absolute integrity of his mandate to protect the Serbian people there. Now, if you believe for a moment that Serbs haven't been victimized, massacred, tortured, killed, you need to really educate yourself again about the realities of the Balkans. What happened? What happened during the war? This NATO unmandated UN assault on the people of Serbia, which constituted the main part of the Yugoslav Republic. Yugoslavia was too powerful. It had to be stopped, had to be shut down. Had an economy bigger than Italy. It was a very big threat to the Western program. Still is. Huge amounts of NGOs. I've been there, spent a lot of time in Serbia. Keep your eyes on Republika Srpska, which is being crushed, not just geographically, but politically. Much as the opposition in Moldova is being crushed. Much like the head of the autonomous region in Moldova, Yevgenia Gutsul, has been imprisoned with rapists because she speaks out against Maia Sandu's complicity and compliance with the EU regime. Moldova is not in the EU. Moldova is not in NATO. No more than Ukraine is in the EU or NATO. Remember what's happening. See what's happening as part of a global chessboard. Same in Syria, the destruction of the Assad regime, as imperfect as it may have been. Look what's happened in Syria since. Look what's happened with Iran being attacked. Look what's happened with the endless assaults on Hungary via Ukraine intelligence. Slovakia. None of this is happening by accident. This is all about putting pressure on Russia and its sphere of influence, much like Taiwan. Nobody cares about Taiwan really in the West, in the UK or in Washington. They care about the chips, but they could be manufactured elsewhere. They want to antagonize Russia, they want to antagonize China, and they've tried to do it with Iran, of course, but Iran is still standing. I urge you to look at it as part of a bigger picture. And it's so important that you do that you don't see anything in isolation, because nothing happens by accident. Much like this escalation and these threats against Russia, that there's going to be sanctions on India, on Brazil, and on Russia itself. You're going to be punished for buying the oil as cheaply as possible for your people so they don't starve or go hungry. You need to be like Europe. You need to lay the cost of this idiotic proxy war at the feet of your citizens and taxpayers, who are left paying massive energy bills, struggling to educate and feed their kids. For what? For a corrupt drug addict in Ukraine to distribute money in apartments with golden toilets to his cabal of absolute criminals. That's what this is about. Don't forget it. There's absolutely nobody that the Western elites will not get into bed with in order to try and inflict this elusive strategic defeat on Russia. That's what's going on. Don't forget it. Bear it in mind. And I'm going to be here in Moscow trying to shed a bit of objective light on what's actually happening. It's remarkably important that we continue to do that. And thanks for your support in helping me to do it. I really appreciate it. Thanks very much. I'll talk to you all soon. Look after yourselves.